Ringo, Starr, John Malkovich, and Gene Shalit in the Critics' Corner after Station Break.
Monday.
We're back at 7:30 on a Thursday morning. Gene Shalit has wandered out to join us.
How are y'all?
Okay, we're not going to talk about you just yet because you're going to
Why
talk.
not?
Well, you're going to talk about you.
It's a heck of a subject.
In just a moment.
It's a big subject.
We are going to be talking about the nation's troubled savings and loans in this half hour. We'll find out what kind of trouble they're in and how much it may wind up costing you. Jane?
If someone had told me 20 years ago that you will grow up and one day you will meet Ringo Starr in person, I certainly would have taken the job. Ringo Starr is here in this half hour, and a children's TV series of all things. It makes a lot of sense if you've seen Yellow Submarine lately.
I like his jacket. I saw his jacket this morning. It looks great. I'll be in the Critics' Corner with my jacket on, talking about the January Man. I wish I could get out of this, but I think I'll just give it back to Brian.
Okay, actor John Malkovich will be here, too. Let's get on over to the news desk where Keith Morrison is in for John Palmer. Keith?
Thank you, Brian. Good morning. President Reagan, who leaves office 8 days from now, summed up his 8 years in the White House last night in his farewell address to the nation. In a speech that was upbeat and sentimental, the president said his administration has sought to change the nation and instead change the world. And he pointed with particular pride to a couple of accomplishments.
The way I see it, there were two great triumphs, two things that I'm proudest of. One is the economic recovery in which the people of America created and filled 19 million new jobs. The other is the recovery of our morale. America is respected again in the world and looked to for leadership.
Mr. Reagan, speaking about his regrets in office, cited but one, the deficit. He made no mention of the American hostages in Lebanon or the Iran-Contra affair. Earlier on today, Bryant asked the president's daughter, Maureen, whether it will be difficult for her father now to return to private life.
No, I don't think so. I think he's very much prepared for being able to take a day off, which a president never gets to do. 8 years is a long time to work 7 days a week.
President Reagan is getting a military send-off today from the Defense Department. The farewell ceremony to take place at Andrews Air Force Base, and every single four-star general and admiral now in uniform has been invited to attend it. President-elect Bush today is expected to fill his one remaining cabinet post. He is expected to announce retired Admiral James Watkins as his choice to become Energy Secretary. Watkins just recently had headed President Reagan's Commission on AIDS. There is also word that former Education Secretary William Bennett will be named to a post in the Bush administration. According to the New York Times, Bennett will become the drug czar. Striking Mexican oil workers are heading back to their jobs this morning, persuaded in part by government soldiers. The Army presence was beefed up in many oil-producing cities in Mexico after the arrest of a key union leader on weapons charges prompted most workers to leave their jobs. The walkout also triggered long lines and panic buying at gas pumps, many drivers fearing the strike would shut down Mexico's oil industry altogether. British Airlines are under orders this morning to take a close look at engines and fire alarm wiring systems on airplanes similar to the Boeing 737 that crashed on Sunday night. While there has been no determination yet about the cause of the crash, investigators say it is possible that a faulty alarm system caused the crew to shut down the wrong engine of the plane. In this country, the FAA has called for similar inspections on about 300 737 jets. Israeli warplanes this morning raided suspected guerrilla positions in southern Lebanon. Military officials say the planes hit targets near Sidon, reportedly a base used by the organization headed by Abu Nidal. And on the island of Sicily, Mount Etna has roared to life, spewing lava and ash from the crater atop the 11,000-foot volcano. And the ground shook as the eruption began. An earthquake measured 2.8 on the Richter scale. Mount Etna last erupted in 1981. 7:34 now. Bryant?
All right, Keith, thank you. Willard's got a check of the weather in just a moment, and then we'll hear from actor John Malkovich. That's right after this. 7:36 now. Mr. Scott has the weather, sir.
Remember that wonderful Dancer Tempest view? Just that fantastic. Time is definitely passing. Can you believe New Orleans? I was reminded 79 degrees yesterday. That was a record high temperature for New Orleans. And Mardi Gras is just not that far away. What is Easter? It's in March this year, isn't it? I believe it's a little early. Unreal. So time is wasted. Happy birthday to Oma Harper of Louisville, Kentucky, 107 years old. And she walks every day to the dining room by herself. Annette Burnworth never missed a meal. Annette Burnworth, Beaverton, Oregon, is 100 years old today, and we wish her a sincere and happy birthday. Her only problem, she says, is once in a while she gets a toothache. But that says it all. She's still got her own teeth. False teeth never ache. Remember that. Dangerous travel conditions today from the mountains of New England back down through upstate New York, all the way down into Scranton, Pennsylvania. A lot of ice on the road. Do be careful. Also some delays expected because heavy rain in the east of Mississippi today, especially up around Boston and Washington, D.C., New York City, Philadelphia. There could be some air delays because of that. Fog, dense, thick fog once again in Atlanta, Georgia, but scattered showers and fog throughout the entire southeast, lower Mississippi. Also fog in Tennessee. You might get a lot of delays in the airports there. The western states are good except for a lot of high wind again. Those Santa Ana winds will be blowing. Los Angeles 68, not a bad temperature, but windy, and LAX could have some delays as well. Cold temperatures continue throughout the upper Mississippi Valley and the northern plain states and the Rockies, only a high of 16 in Minneapolis, but that's not all that bad for this time of the year. Here's what's happening in your world even as we speak.
Cloudy and in the 40s today, rain developing this afternoon and continuing through the evening. A nighttime low in the mid-30s. Tomorrow will be sunny, windy, and temperatures falling toward the 20s.
I'm informed Easter is March 26th. That is a little early. 7:37 is the time, and now here's Jane Paul.
Thank you, Willard. I'm out in Hollywood. Jim Brown says if you want to use the word meteoric to describe the movie career of John Malkovich, go ahead. It fits.
It was just 5 years ago that John Malkovich appeared in his first movie. But in that short span, he has acquired an Academy Award nomination and a reputation as a highly competent actor. Now, Malkovich's list of film credits include this latest release, Dangerous Liaisons. Co-starring with Glenn Close and Michelle Pfeiffer, Malkovich is the immoral Valmont in this adaptation of a play based on a novel and set in 18th century France. Seduction is his game, and his target is the married Madame de Tourvel, played by Pfeiffer.
I know God is punishing me for my pride. I was so certain nothing like this could ever happen.
Nothing like what? Do you mean love?
I can't.
Is love what you mean?
You promised not to speak of it.
Yes, of course, I understand, but I must know.
I can't. Don't you understand? It's impossible.
You don't have to speak. You don't have to speak. Just look at me.
Yes.
His mission in life, I think, is to sort of conquer and destroy. I mean, if we go on two kinds of tours in our lives, one being the Hearts and Minds tour, his is probably the Scorched Earth tour. But further down, I think he's a very tragic figure. And I think he searches for what everyone searches for. They search for love. It's just he does it in a rather mistaken, vicious, devious, but unfortunately sort of charming way.
I've had the most wonderful letter from her. Really? Not like any of her other letters. Somehow, quite a different tone of voice.
My dearest Dulcinea, I swear to you
on my chastity, that even if my mother forces me to go through with this marriage, I shall be yours completely.
You're gonna miss him. John Malkovich's first film role was that of a photographer in the killing fields, a story set against the turmoil of a bloodied Cambodia. He followed that with Places in the Heart, where his performance of the blind man resulted in an Oscar nomination. Other movies include the comedy Making Mr. Right and Steven Spielberg's epic of World War II China, Empire of the Sun.
When I think of movie stars, I mean, really, I frankly think of people who couldn't act a lick. They looked good or something, or they had a certain kind of quality, a mythic quality, but, you know, I think an actor, someone, can they... You know, if they could be in Naked Gun, and they could be in Hamlet, and they could be really good at both of them, they're an actor, you know. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I like to go see Gary Cooper films or something, you know, I certainly would prefer them to mine, but, I mean, I don't know that he was an actor. And, you know, I don't really know how I would go about that. I don't really know what I am. And so I certainly couldn't really be hired to play it. And I play characters.
But Malkovich also played a role in a current movie, and he is never seen. In The Accidental Tourist, starring William Hurt and Kathleen Turner, Malkovich's credit reads executive producer.
It's a different kind of satisfaction. And it's a satisfaction of just helping put a story that you liked, helping it to be done. But it's not necessarily the kind of emotional release or sort of exorcism that doing a film or doing a play might be. It's not therapeutic.
You see, until I met you, I had only ever experienced desire. Love, never.
And therapeutic it is in the competitive sexual gamesmanship played for power and greed of the current John Malkovich film, the one in which he acts, Dangerous Liaisons. For today, Jim Brown, NBC News, Hollywood.
Tomorrow, Jim talks to Michelle Pfeiffer. We'll be back in a moment. Bryant looks at the savings and loan mess after a message.
You can include the failing savings and loan industry among the many problems Ronald Reagan will soon dump in George Bush's lap. The president's own advisors have called the insolvent S&L problem a mess. And Mr. Reagan has finally conceded the need to find new revenue for a massive bailout. Just what that bailout will mean to you and me is well understood by Dan Brumbaugh, formerly a deputy chief economist with the Federal Home Loan Bank Board. Mr. Brumbaugh, good morning.
Good morning.
Let's get the problem together first. In brief, are they in trouble because it's a simple matter of long-term home loans being outpaced by other investment vehicles?
It's that problem, plus a problem of a large amount of domestic real estate, which is underwater due to deflation in real estate, primarily in the Southwest, particularly in Texas. But it's throughout the country as well.
So somebody has to control that real estate?
Absolutely.
All right. Your best guess, how much is the bailout going to cost?
My best guess is it's going to cost about $100 billion, and that $100 billion is growing at a rate of at least $1 billion per month. That's $1 billion per month.
So the longer we go without doing something to it, the more it's going to cost us.
Right. I think it's growing at a rate which is alarming.
Okay, $100 billion. Where's that money go to? I mean, once Congress has that money and turns it over and says, okay, this is being used, and that's a big if at that point, right, where does that money go?
If the institution is taken control of by the government and liquidated, what happens is the depositors get a check in the mail in approximately 2 weeks, and the government takes control of the assets. If, on the other hand, it is acquired by an outside institution or an investor, then the money goes into the institution which is acquired by that new acquirer and is actually cash and cash equivalents in the institution.
When the government takes control of the assets, does the government become a bank then?
Well, in essence, the government is a bank now, because essentially what we have is a massive bankruptcy in which the government is the general creditor. You and I as taxpayers are the general creditors. So they now, in essence, have control of all the assets in the insolvent banks in one shape or another. They're just changing that control when they finally sell the institution to someone else.
What about that other option? I mean, if an investor comes along and buys that failing S&L, I mean, we've just seen an instance where people are getting very big assets for very, very little money in a comparative sense. I know the government is taking the best bid, but in this case, is the government getting taken?
I don't think we know, and I don't think we're going to know for some time. There's reason to be concerned when the government uses guarantees and transfers tax benefits instead of using cash, because it's so much more complicated to calculate what it all means. So there's a possibility. There's also a possibility, however, that these transactions will work out just fine for the government.
Well, I have no problem with them working out just fine for the government, but my problem is, are they going to work out just fine for the investor?
Again, it's uncertain. The emphasis thus far in the transactions done at the end of the year was how good a deal they were for the investors in the short run. In the long run, these investors, or whoever they ultimately sell these institutions to, must earn a profit that will keep them sustained. And that's a highly variable proposition in today's world.
The S&Ls were originally set up to help people finance home loans. So there are a number of ways that can be done now. Do we really need the S&L industry?
In essence, we don't need them to hold the mortgages.
So why not just phase it out?
Well, I think that it will be phased out in the following sense. They will become more like banks, and both banks and thrifts will be able to finance as many home mortgages as they choose to voluntarily. At the moment, we basically require them to hold about 60% of their assets in mortgages, and that's very inefficient. We should let them have greater freedom to do other sorts of things. So they won't be a traditional savings and loan, but the same people who run them and the same people who own stock in them will probably be there.
In your book, Thrifts Under Siege, you advocate reducing the insurance from 100 grand to 25 grand. Nonetheless, if I've got money in there, is it safe?
Oh, depositors have absolutely nothing to worry about. In a sense, we have a kind of interesting, perverse situation. The best thing for a depositor to do who has insured deposits is to put it, excuse me, in the most insolvent institution they can find, paying the highest interest rate they can find, because they're perfectly safe.
Real quick, do you see any way we can bail this out without a tax hike?
There's no way. Well, without a tax hike, yes. The government can borrow money, but ultimately then there'll be a tax hike later.
Ultimately, we still pay for it.
That's right, you and I.
Wonderful. Dan Brumbaugh, thanks very much.
Thank you.
It's 48 past. Jane's back in a moment with Ringo Starr after a station break.
What's your name?
Matthew. Matt.
Move over, Pee-wee, Kermit, and Bert and Ernie. Make room for Ringo. Ringo Starr is about to become a household name all over again in a new PBS series called Shining Time Station. It's a children's show, and we're happy to welcome both Ringo and co-star Brian O'Connor to our show this morning. Sometimes our show feels like a children's show as well. And good morning. Excuse me, Brian, but
yes?
Ringo Starr is here.
Oh, he was here, isn't he?
And do you know, my own children know who you are already, albeit they think that you might be an animated character. They're not certain. Are you aware that Yellow Submarine has become a cult thing with 4-year-olds?
No idea. It's fabulous.
I was wondering, in fact, because that is true, at least in some places, if that was why you got into this children's TV show business.
No, this is new to me. I mean, the children's show we've done, Shining Time Station, started in England when I just narrate these children's stories, and it became very popular. It's probably the biggest show there for children of that age group.
So whose idea was it? Who had the idea that Ringo Starr could communicate with kids at some level?
Well, 3 of my own. They got the message. Britta Allcroft, who produced the show, she came up to see me. Well, she wrote a letter first, then she came to see me. She had this idea for me to narrate these children's stories. And they're all about these fabulous little trains, you know. And I really backed off at the beginning, thinking, well, kids are into dinosaurs with guns on their backs, you know, and spaceships. Yeah. I used it. It's his line, actually. And so, you know, she kept at me, and then in the end I said, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just read flat 5 of the stories. And I sent the tape to her, and if you still need me, then we'll talk again. And she still needed me, and so we did them. And it was just amazing how big it got, you know.
All right, Brian, you can tell us about the trains. What is it about these trains at this Shining Time Station?
I don't know. I guess little kids just seem to like trains, you know. But there's more to the show than just the trains per se. It basically takes place inside a train station, you know. And all these magical things happen, including Ringo, who sort of lives in a wall and is 18 inches tall. And then we have all the other kind of visitors and these other machines that happen and stuff. So it's the trains are sort of what comes out of the station, but it's actually what happens in the station.
You've cut him down to size, is what you're saying.
18 inches, yeah.
I'm 18 inches tall.
Well, actually, my character actually never sees his either.
No?
No, every time I appear, he says in some kind of couplet, basically, here comes that jerk, I got to get out of here.
You do play a naughty man.
Yes, a naughty man.
A con artist with a heart of gold or something like that.
Yeah, I'm
a heart.
Yeah, if it was gold, I'd probably sell it.
All right, let's stop there and take a little look at a clip from
great.
Shining Time Station.
Have you noticed the new schedules that I had printed up?
You had those schedules printed up? Why, those schedules are all wrong, and if the schedules are wrong, the passengers will miss their trains.
I know. So what? Who cares? It's fantastic. They miss their train, so they have nothing to do. Therefore, consequently so, they go to my arcade and spend their money in my machines.
Oh, you really are a schemer, aren't you?
Well, that's what they call me, the schemer, and the pleasure is all mine.
Yes.
Can't do a job halfway. What's worth doing is worth doing well, I say. What's your name?
Matthew.
Or is it Matthew? And you may call me Mr. Conductor.
If it's on PBS, you've got to have noble intentions as the object to teach something. I mean, lessons must be learned at schemers' expense, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think the noble intention is basically to do a show for kids about kids and stuff, not like sort of like Pee Wee show, stuff like that, sort of like a mirror version of it, comes back in on itself and more comments on what's going on, you know? I think that the show is sincere and that we're really trying to talk to kids, you know?
All right.
You know, we talk to them, not at them.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll be there.
Hey, good.
It's actually, it is,
don't know if the kids will, but...
it is for 4 to 7 or 3 to 7, but basically the show's all supposed to be a family show, that families can watch the show with their kids.
Yeah.
Which I think is important.
All right, I appreciate that.
It's a nice half hour if you want a break and you sit down with the kids, instead of just putting them in front of the telly and you go and do whatever you want to do.
No, we don't do that in my house.
Oh, not in your house. I mean, all the other houses.
Yeah, right. None of them do it either and admit it on television. Certainly not. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
And we'll be back after this.